I heard the bride's brother had finished high school only. It would be a disgrace for us to accept the poor man without a college degree as one of the family.
It is my dear sister's wedding, as I was moved to tears seeing her radiant beauty, wishing our late father could witness it. Her Phil suddenly mocked me in his speech.
Should I prescribe some medicine for stupidity?
It seemed like he was trying to be funny, but he was the only one laughing. This troublemaker, spoiling what should have been a joyous occasion, continued to hurl insults directed solely at me. As everyone started to feel uncomfortable, my sister, the bride, began to laugh. The Phil looked puzzled by her reaction, but when she regained her composure, she coldly addressed him. With those words, he would come to regret every single thing he said. My name is Kevin Johnson. My father was a self-employed businessman, and thanks to his moderate success, our family of 4, including my parents and sister, lived a fairly comfortable life. With our comfortable living, I focused heavily on my schoolwork. Of course, I also valued participating in committees and hanging out with friends. Thanks to this, I was recognized as an honor student who performed well and was highly trusted. Proud of this, I continued to work hard. I always had someone by my side and never faced any hardships. I led a life untouched by despair. However, everything changed after a certain accident. It was my 11th grade winter. Just when I was thinking of buckling down for college, my father, David Johnson, passed away in a car accident. My mother, already frail, became bedridden. Due to the emotional toll of the accident, she had to frequently visit the hospital. On top of that, we discovered my father had left behind some debts. While his business seemed to be thriving, it appeared it just seemed that way. Between the funeral expenses and debt repayments, our savings dwindled to almost nothing. Given these circumstances, I decided not to go to college. I did so to support our daily living, my mother's medical expenses, and the education of my younger sister, Emily. With no work experience and a high school degree, I was hired as a restaurant staff member. A friend of my late father, knowing our situation, offered me a job at the restaurant he owned. But that income wasn't enough. On my days off and before shifts, I also took on a newspaper delivery job and did some home-based part-time work. About a year after I graduated high school, my mother's health improved, and she was able to handle household chores and simple part-time jobs.
Mom, Kevin, I won't go to college. I can let you two bear all the burden.
She suddenly proposed this. What are you saying, Emily? You should pursue your dreams without worrying about the household.
That's right, Emily. You always said you wanted to go to college, didn't you?
Both my mother and I disagreed with her idea. I didn't want Emily to give up what I had. Moreover, with our combined efforts, our living situation has somewhat stabilized. It wasn't exactly easy, but not to the point where Emily had to abandon her dreams to help out. Life is okay, so just follow your own path.
Kevin.
Repeating these words a few times, it seemed that she finally understood. A year went by.
I finished everything about my college.
Fortunately, Emily, who's graduating from high school, has decided on her future path. She got into an Ivy League known nationwide, showing me and our mother an email. In the email, it read, "Accepted."
And look here.
What? Where she pointed, it read, "Emily Johnson as a scholarship student." She was chosen as a scholarship student, and amazingly, this scholarship covers all fees from admission through graduation.
Oh my, isn't that wonderful?
You did it, Emily. Apparently, she had been working hard aiming to be a scholarship student to avoid burdening the family, despite me telling her not to worry about us. With gratitude for her efforts, I thought this, meaning it as praise. 3 more years went by. Emily continued her hard work in college and was set to move on to get a job. I'll miss her, but I genuinely celebrated her new beginning. Seeing my sister pursue her dreams so passionately made me as happy as if it were about my own life. Time flies. 4 years and a bit had passed since Emily graduated from college. By then, our life had completely stabilized. My mother still had frequent health issues, but mentally, she was just as resilient as she was before our dad passed away. As for Emily, she landed a job at a major corporation post-college, working in the administrative department. From what I've heard, Emily is a quick learner and is highly regarded. There are many experienced administrators there, but seems like she works very well. Then, Emily suddenly announced she'd be getting married. Her fiancé is an executive at her company, and interestingly, the son of the current CEO. I believe his name was Michael Klein. Despite being the CEO's son, he is incredibly humble and genuine. He's quite the charmer, popular with many. But it's an honor as her brother to think that she's been chosen by such a man. I felt relieved, almost fatherly, that she didn't end up with the wrong guy. There was to be a meeting with the Klein family. Unfortunately, my mother fell ill right at that time. To fill that gap, I had to attend on short notice. I joined the meeting in place of my mother.
Thank you for coming today, especially given the bad weather.
Mr. Steve Klein, Michael's father and the CEO of the company where Emily works, began his greeting. Given that he's the CEO of a major corporation, he looks every bit the dignified figure. When I asked why his wife wasn't present, he replied that his wife passed away a few years ago. I should have asked Emily for more details before this. Oh, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. There was an awkward silence. During that time, only the sound of the rain loudly echoed around. As Steve mentioned, the weather was unfortunately very rainy.
Anyway, Emily is a wonderful lady.
Steve kept praising Emily, mentioning her intelligence and beauty repeatedly.
She graduated from a renowned college, didn't she?
He was all praise for Emily's college as well.
It's such an honor to have someone like Emily join our company and to have her marry my son. What a blessing.
Oh, thank you for those kind words. It's nice that he praises my sister so much, but it's a bit too much and I can't help but give a wry smile.
By the way,
With what was a full smile moments ago, Steve's face turned slightly serious and looked me straight in the eye. I met his gaze, wondering what was coming next.
which college did you graduate from?
Well, actually, Taken aback by the sudden question about my education, I hesitated. I graduated high school and started working, which is quite different from Emily's. But lying about it wouldn't do any good. Lies and misdeeds are always brought to light. So, I decided to be honest. I didn't go to college. I had to start working right after high school because of family circumstances.
Oh, really? Well.
After hearing about my educational background, Steve seemed a bit surprised. He then went into deep thought for a moment,
The reason he didn't go to college is.
seemingly judging that my explanation was insufficient. Emily tried to explain. However, she was interrupted by Steve.
No need to explain further. I understand there might be personal reasons.
Although he chose his words carefully, he clearly looked down on me for not having a higher education. He tried to keep a smile, but it looked more like a smirk. Moreover, the end of his words from earlier had risen slightly, and there was a suppressed chuckle, as if he couldn't hold back a giggle.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Here's the appetizer for the course.
At that moment, the course meal we'd ordered was served. Both of us were excited about the marriage, and the initial meeting was supposed to be joyful. However, the mood became tense after just one conversation. As more and more delicious dishes were served, the atmosphere wasn't conducive to enjoying the flavors, and our meeting was over. The day of Emily and Michael's wedding, seeing her in beautiful makeup and a stunning wedding dress, I couldn't hold back my tears.
Don't cry before me, Kevin.
Sorry. I was to walk Emily down the aisle in place of our late father, but given the way I felt, it seemed like a daunting task.
Time to enter.
Guided by the attendant, we took our designated spots. The door swung open, and unusually loud music filled the hall. Honestly, my memory from that point onward is a bit hazy. It was partly because of the overwhelming nervousness and partly because my vision was blurred with tears. But one thing I do remember is the feeling of my chest being full with emotions built up over the years. The hardships Emily faced after our father passed away, changing our lives, and her efforts to save on tuition fees were immeasurable. Please take care of Emily. As I entrusted my sister, I whispered this to Michael, and he nodded back. Confirming his response, I returned to my seat, wiping my eyes with a towel. The reception continued pleasantly, and finally, Steve gave a formal speech. It began with words of thanks and went on for quite a while. He must have talked for about 15 minutes. I thought he was wrapping up soon, but he started a new topic.
Speaking of college,
He began, casting a glance my way.
I heard that the bride's brother didn't go to college.
As he disclosed my background without my permission, the hall buzzed with murmurs. Whether it was gossip about my past or complaints directed at Steve, I couldn't be sure.
Emily has such an impressive background, but her brother, well, it would be a disgrace for us to accept the poor man without a college degree as one of the family.
While I was still lost in my emotions, Steve practically named and shamed me. Of course, I was angry, but above all, I was filled with other feelings and farts.
Should I prescribe some meds for this fool?
Steve said with a smirk. He seemed to be trying to make a joke, but he was the only one laughing. The troublemaker who ruined the mood went on hurling insults at me personally for a while longer.
Well, that's all from me.
He concluded abruptly. Normally, there would be applause, but the guests were in a state of shock, resembling what we call being grossed out. Breaking that tense atmosphere, suddenly, a loud laughter echoed. Everyone looked around, wondering what was going on. Emily. After searching for a few seconds, it became apparent that the source of the laughter was Emily herself. Steve looked at her with a puzzled expression. Although not spoken aloud, his expression strongly conveyed a sense of what's so funny. Even after seeing Steve's face, Emily continued laughing, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. I was worried her makeup was going to get messed up. After her laughter subsided, she let out an exasperated sigh, looked at Steve.
Mr. President, don't you think you should at least remember the faces of the shareholders?
What? Shareholder?
Michael agreed with Emily's statement and shot a sharp glance at his father.
You don't remember my brother attending the shareholders meeting. He is a major shareholder in our company.
There were things I didn't know about her FIL, like the fact that his wife had passed away. However, I didn't think he didn't recognize me at all. When we met, I introduced myself, but I thought it was just a formality. But it seems it was genuinely the first time for him.
Huh? What?
Steve could only respond with a question mark. He seemed extremely flustered. Well, I slowly stood up and approached him. Emily has an impressive background, but what was about me again? He seemed speechless from the shock. He must have realized who he was talking to and what he had said based on Emily's words. My father owned a lot of stocks. When my father passed away, I was only in 11th grade. I was too young to invest in stocks, so my mother became the official heir to the shares. However, my mother wasn't in a good mental state, so the inherited stocks remained dormant for some time. By the time Emily reached college, my mother's mental state had considerably improved. She finally had the time to consider the inherited stocks. Upon closer inspection, most of the companies my father had invested in had grown significantly. The returns were more than enough to get us out of our financial struggle. Thanks to that, I can now solely rely on my restaurant business. From that time, I became interested in stocks and, like my father, began investing my surplus funds. Gradually, I increased my stock holdings, and now I can say I'm a major shareholder in Steve's company. Although it was a company mentioned in my father's notes, I sometimes think it was a very risky move. I'm glad the company became successful.
It's a shame, Dad.
Michael said to the trembling Steve with a dumbfounded look.
I admired you as a president who kept growing our business.
Michael,
Maybe his son's words snapped him back to reality, and he began to shake as he called out Michael's name.
But I can't believe you don't even remember the face of a shareholder. You lack awareness as a president. No, even before that. It's unacceptable to insult someone like that, especially he is our family.
Steve was crying, repeatedly murmuring his son's name.
I'm sorry, Dad, but you're the disgrace of our family.
Citing the words Steve had said earlier, Michael strongly reprimanded him. Steve let out and with a resentful but pale face, looked at me.
Why would a high school graduate buy shares in my company?
He pointed at me and asked weakly. By now, logic didn't matter one bit. Do you need an education to buy stocks? I replied in disbelief, and Steve turned beach red and looked down. Well, if I had to give a reason, it's because my father left a note saying I should buy shares in this company. Ever heard of David Johnson? When I mentioned my father's name, the color drained from his face and he turned pale again.
That guy, he was in an accident.
His shaking was anything but normal. Seeing this, Michael called in some help and ended the wedding. There were two reasons I bought shares in Steve's company. One was because Emily worked there. The other reason was what I told Steve. My father left it in his notes. Most of the shares my father owned belonged to his business partners. Among them was the name of Steve's company, but I never imagined Emily would end up working there and marrying the heir. Curious about this miraculous connection, I did some digging after that meeting. I found a few suspicious things. My father seems to have done business with your father in the past. I shared over the phone with Michael while examining my father's belongings.
Yes, I've heard of David Johnson. I was probably in elementary or middle school back then.
I found my father's planner. On the day of that unforgettable accident, there's an entry about dining with Steve.
Really? So what kind of business did my father and yours do?
Well, I pulled out a confidentiality agreement and other documents from the file and started to read the details of their business.
Wait, that business.
According to Michael, the work my father and Steve did together was what made Steve's company skyrocket. From what I could gather, they were doing a promising business together. My father tragically died, and Steve continued the work on his own and became wildly successful. A disturbing narrative was emerging, but it was too early to conclude anything. The story's development and conclusion weren't adding up yet.
In that case, we'd want records of when my father took over David's work. I'll look into it.
Please do. If you need any help, please ask Emily. I'll let her know as well.
Understood?
Some time after that, shortly after the wedding, Michael went to see Steve's hospital room and office after he had been hospitalized due to extreme stress. With Emily's help, they thoroughly investigated and found records from when he took over the business. It was worded cautiously, but the gist was that my mother is mentally unstable, so Steve could do as he pleased. Taking advantage of the state my grieving mother was in, he forced her into an overwhelmingly advantageous contract for himself. I was livid, but I knew I couldn't rush things, or all our efforts would be in vain. I told Emily to stay calm. With this, the connection in the story was established. About a month later, Steve seemed to have returned, but he was far from normal. He'd say nonsensical things one moment and then suddenly go out and drown himself in alcohol. It must have been tough for Michael to see his father like that, but he approached Steve all for the sake of the investigation.
I had to pick up my father from the bar after he'd had too much to drink and managed to get him alone.
Then, Michael told us over the phone about the business and about our father.
He said proudly, for some reason, I sabotaged the brakes of the car that David was driving.
Michael's voice trembling increasingly as he continued, audible through the speakerphone. We could hear him sniffling and his voice choking up.
He also made David's wife take on a lot of debt. And then he took over David's business. Essentially, he wanted to take over David's business to expand his own.
Both I and Emily were speechless after hearing this. The cause of our father's death might not have been an accident after all. It might have been deliberately caused by a man named Steve Klein. Any normal person would find it hard to find words after such a revelation. In front of this heart-wrenching story, neither Emily or I could shed a tear. All we could hear from the speaker was Michael's sobbing and continuous apologies. However, our father passed away almost 10 years ago. All we know is that a drunk Steve mentioned tampering with the brakes, and there's no concrete evidence that he intentionally caused the accident. How can we bring him to justice? After some thought, I first demanded his resignation as a major shareholder. The disgraceful scene he made, especially at a board member's wedding, was unforgivable. As Michael told me, Steve has been depending on alcohol recently and hasn't been working. His reputation had already hit rock bottom, and no one protested when he stepped down. With Michael's support, another board member was promoted to CEO. After that, I put all my effort into finding the mechanic. From that time, Michael even took a leave of absence to help me out.
"I'll settle this for my father," he repeated multiple times with determination.
I genuinely thought he was admirable. At the same time, I felt he was an amazing son-in-law, and I could trust him with my sister, Emily. A year after starting our investigation into Steve and my father, we finally found the mechanic who tampered with the brakes. He was just an average worker at a small garage in Alabama. However, he was former. When he learned that his actions had led to someone's death, he quit his job and shut himself in. When Michael talked to him about Steve, this former mechanic confessed through tears.
"It seems there's a big building now, but the workshop was small. I didn't earn enough to support my family,"
he said, trembling, revealing his traumatic past one detail at a time.
"Then, your father, Steve, came with a drawing. He said if I followed the plan, the payment would be substantial. I knew that drawing was suspicious, but I got blinded by the money.
The amount Steve offered was astonishing.
I've always been torn, whether I should confess or not, but I was scared. Scared of being punished. No, of retaliation from that man. I was terrified."
Out of fear and guilt, he confined himself to his room. The family he wanted to protect left him, and he's been living a meager existence ever since. "Shall we go to the police together?" I suggested. Wanting to atone for his sins, he nodded vigorously, his eyes red from crying. During the police interrogation, he confessed everything. He tampered with the brakes under Steve Klein's instructions, took the money, and that led to my father's death. He told everything. Using his statement, Steve was taken in as a strong person of interest. The investigation into his wrongdoing and illegal activities led to his formal arrest. But even with Steve's arrest, my father isn't coming back. Days went by, filled with emptiness and no sense of accomplishment. One day, when I returned home, I noticed an unfamiliar luxury car parked in the driveway. Wondering what was going on, I entered the house and found Emily and Michael in the living room. My mother was serving tea, indicating that my arrival was just moments after their visitors.
Excuse me for interrupting.
We are sorry for coming without notice.
No worries, but what's going on? You both seem so formal. Both were dressed in formal attire for some reason.
Well, I have something I want to discuss with you, Kevin.
Michael said with a serious expression.
What Steve Klein did is unforgivable. Can his son marry the daughter of the man who was betrayed by him? That's equally unacceptable. That's how I feel.
Michael then, with tears in his eyes, began to talk about breaking up with Emily. From Emily's calm demeanor, it seemed she had been consulted in advance. I see. If you want to break up, just do it. You're both adults after all. It's your choice.
Kevin.
But that's only if you really want to break up. Michael looked at me as if asking what I meant. If you feel responsible for what your father did and that's why you're saying this, it's a different story.
Why?
Michael looked shocked. Maybe I hit the nail on the head. The responsibility for what that man did lies with him. You, who were just an elementary school student at the time, don't have to take any blame. So, I have a request. I looked into his eyes enthusiastically. Despite his confusion, I continued, if your feelings for Emily haven't changed, please make her happy.
Kevin, I'm sorry. You're right. My feelings haven't changed. I still truly want to be with her.
He said that while crying. Emily, sitting beside him, covered her face with both hands, blushing. Emily, are you okay with that?
Yes, thanks, Kevin.
Somehow, the mood made me feel embarrassed too. To lighten the mood, we all laughed for a while, including my mother. As the day waned, the sky turned orange. Listening to the distant crow's cawing, I started to talk to my father's tombstone. It's been a while, Dad. I reported recent events. Last year, Emily got married. Her husband's an executive at her company, a really honest man. The flowers seemed to nod in the breeze. It looked like my father was happy for Emily's happiness. I also briefly mentioned Steve. But don't worry, I made sure to get back at the devil who deceived you. The verdict isn't out yet, but he seems remorseful. I'm uncertain about what punishment Steve will face. Will he regret his actions? Apologize to my father? It's up to him and out of my understanding. Like the mechanic who tampered with brakes but didn't confess out of fear. Perhaps Steve too was scared of retaliation. His unusual reaction at Emily and Michael's wedding. It seemed to tell the answer. What was it like, holding a position acquired through deceit? Now that he's lost his reputation and credibility, how does he feel? If only he could experience the same pain as my father. Maybe I'm wicked for thinking that. Still, I'll hold my head high and live. I aspire to be someone strong, someone who doesn't shame himself. Conveying these wishes to my father, I tidied up and left the cemetery.
Worn out suits you so well.
Samantha Anderson said that, splashing the can of beer she was holding onto my head during my shift, laughing loudly. My name is Josh Miller. My names are just a Josh. So whenever I'm asked if my real name is Joshua, I respond with just Josh, and it always leads to a comment like, "That's unique." Interestingly, this name was given to me by my late grandfather, who believed that keeping it simple would make it easier for people to remember, and I've grown fond of it. As for my background, my parents divorced when I was just starting to understand the world around me. I was raised by my mother in a single-parent household. I've never been told why they divorced. However, I vividly remember my mom was crying the night my dad left. So I never felt the urge to ask about the reason. Growing up in a single mom household meant my mom had to earn what usually a man would bring in by himself. She had multiple part-time jobs, working from dawn to dusk, to ensure I had a decent life. Seeing her tireless efforts, even as I was a kid, I felt compelled to make the most out of my studies and often suppressed my own desires. I really wanted to play soccer, but I was worried it would affect my grades, so I never joined a team. Looking back, financially, we couldn't have afforded the cleats and uniforms anyway, so I think it was the right call. Unlike some kids, I didn't have the extra textbooks or tutoring, but thanks to my sharp intellect and exceptional memory, I consistently ranked at the top of my class throughout elementary school. But even with my mom working multiple jobs, they were still just part-time positions. She never had the chance for promotions or bonuses, so our financial situation remained stagnant. So as I moved into middle school, our financial struggles continued. In elementary school, there was no uniform, so I always wore worn-out clothes. And by the upper grades, classmates and teachers had pegged me as the poor family. Luckily, from middle school, we had school uniforms and bags, so I wasn't constantly reminded of my family's financial situation in public. Then, almost the end of the year of 7th grade, while I was doing homework in classroom after school, the most popular and beautiful girl in our grade, named Samantha Anderson, approached me asking, "You're Josh, right?" "Yes, that's me." Having transferred from a different district in elementary school, I struggled to fit into this new environment. So I spent most of my time reading books without making any friends. Just then, to top it all off, I was approached by the popular Samantha. I couldn't hide my agitation. Seemingly oblivious to my nervousness, Samantha continued nonchalantly.
So, Josh, how much do you usually study?
"Well, I get to school as soon as the doors open, do the day's prep, and after school, I review like I'm doing now. Then I head home and study until I go to bed."
That's impressive. No wonder you're so smart. I always see your name at the top of the test rankings, but I had no idea who you were. So I got curious and approached you.
Samantha laughing as she said this. She is the prettiest girl I'd ever met. From that day on, Samantha would visit me almost daily, asking for help with her studies. Gradually, not only did we study together, but we also chatted about everyday things and even relationships. By the time we became 8th grader, we started dating. I never thought I'd have a girlfriend, someone like Samantha, in middle school, before making any friends. However, even I have a girlfriend, I was determined not to neglect my studies, so my grades never dropped. Our relationship was going well, but then, one day, everything came to a sudden end. On a certain weekend, we planned our first go-on date. Being the weekend, we weren't in school uniforms, but in our regular clothes. I actually wanted to cancel, thinking Samantha liked me for my smartness, so reluctantly agreed. But Samantha's reaction, when she arrived late at our meeting spot, was unexpected.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
She began, but upon seeing me, her expression changed dramatically.
What are you wearing?
I couldn't blame her. I was wearing a worn-out t-shirt with shabby jeans, looking very underdressed. I tried to justify. Well, I'm not really into fashion. Plus, you know, studying's kind of my thing, and I don't go out much. Still, Samantha looked unconvinced. I had a feeling, but I didn't realize you were Pua this much. That day, Samantha was dressed head to toe in shiny brand name clothes. Think of it, Samantha's family is wealthy. She is a CEO's daughter. Seeing her made me painfully aware of how shabby I looked. I felt utterly embarrassed.
I can't be seen walking next to someone like you. Sorry, but we can't be together anymore. Goodbye.
With that, she walked away, ending our relationship. My school life after that, it was hell. Thanks to Samantha, who was high up in the sociality, the entire graders knew about my family's financial struggles. If that were all, it might have been bearable, but Samantha turned everyone against me. They followed her, looking down on me and even ostracizing me. According to Samantha, it was payback for embarrassing her. Samantha once told me that she sought revenge because she was humiliated. By looking down on me, who had the best grades in the grade, she thoroughly boosted herself, probably trying to maintain the value of her existence as Samantha. But the fact that her grudge escalated into bullying that involved the entire grade is terrifying. At the same time, her popularity was kind of impressive. The bullying included acts like opening all the windows saying, "The mood is off when Josh is around," hiding textbooks or sneakers, and mocking, "Oops, did you lose it? Why not buy a new one? Oh, sorry, your family's Pua, right?" The list of these harassments goes on and on. It continued even we became a high school students. The reason I kept going to school despite all this was mainly because I didn't want to waste my mom's hard work. So, I was determined to keep the top spot in the grade, and I dived deeper into my studies, outperforming my peers. Throughout all this, I sometimes felt like giving up, but I made to graduate. After graduation, I wanted to go to college and study further. Still, I was concerned that if I pushed my mom any harder, she might break down, so I gave up on studying and started working at a hotel. I worked at a famous luxury hotel. Thanks to my mom's connection with the hotel's owner, I got a job there. Typically, they wouldn't hire someone with only a high school diploma, but they made an exception for me. Mr. Johnson is a competent man who owns several other hotels, and he's incredibly strict. It's not because I was young and had only a high school education, but that's his management style, which is a key to his success, as senior employees told me. So, no matter how much he scolded me, I kept working without losing heart. There was a lot to learn, like manners towards guests at a luxury hotel. But as I learned them all, I got scolded less and less.
You learn fast, Josh, right, Mr. Johnson? If you couldn't do at least this much, you wouldn't last here.
No matter how much I improved, Mr. Johnson never once praised me. Still, I poured all the passion I had for studying into my job and gave it my all. I made mistakes sometime, getting yelled at by other employees, but I kept at it. One day, when it was just Mr. Johnson and me at the front desk, he muttered, "Maybe I should start another hotel." Hearing that, I thought I should learn from his entrepreneurial spirit and push myself even harder. And so, 15 years of service went by. And it was on the day I turned 33. As I was standing at the front desk as usual, Samantha Anderson walked in through the automatic doors with a man by her side. She might have been married by her age, but there was no ring on her left finger, so he was probably her boyfriend. As Samantha approached, my heart raced, and I started sweating. And it was when they finally reached right in front of me.
Is that you, Josh?
Yay, Samantha. It's been a while.
No way, you work here. You, being so broke and just a high school grad?
Mocking me, just like old times, she bragged about her boyfriend being an elite employee at a major company, earning $200,000 a year. Before checking in, I had to carry their luggage to their room. Throughout the way, she continued her barrage of insults, but I put on a poker face and completed the task. What a way to celebrate my birthday, being reminded of a painful past by running into Samantha. Even during work, I found myself a bit downcast, and it felt like my concentration might snap. A few hours later during break, the boss came into the break room saying he had something to discuss. After the break, as I got back to work, Samantha showed up in the lobby again. Her flushed face and slightly stumble walk suggested she'd had a drink or two. That's just like Samantha. It's a given that she'd be even more troublesome when drunk. Samantha, heavily sitting on a lobby sofa, took a big swig from the can of beer in her hand and immediately began to pick on me.
I want to know, when did you start working here?
I started right after high school.
Oh, that explains it. No wonder no one's been talking about you. I was looking forward to spilling the beans about your home life back in college, just for fun.
Ha, please stop. I forced a dry smile. I didn't want to engage in too much chit-chat, especially during work hours. I silently wished she'd just leave already. Still, Samantha continued to vent, perhaps holding on to some old grudges against me for the past 15 years.
If I'd known a lowlife like you worked here, I wouldn't have stayed. This is the worst. Why are you at the front desk? You should be housekeeper.
I anticipated that even if other guests arrived, Samantha wouldn't stop. So, I left the front desk and approached her. Please keep your voice down. There are other guests around.
Excuse me, why do I have to listen to you?
The next moment, Samantha stood up, saying, "This uniform doesn't suit you," and poured her half-drunk beer all over my head.
See, rags suit you better.
Samantha laughed heartily. She looked almost wicked, like a witch. Seeing this, other employees quickly rushed over to my aid, but I held them back. It's okay.
But you're all wet.
Yay, I'll go change. I shot Samantha a glance and said, "You've had too much to drink," before leaving the scene. When I returned to the front desk after changing, Samantha was still lounging on the sofa. That's when it happened. Samantha's boyfriend entered and, looking quite excited, said, "There's an awesome car parked outside. It's all black and super sleek. Must be custom made."
Really? My dad has tons of luxury cars, so it's gotta be something extraordinary to impress me.
While they conversed, both peered outside through the automatic doors. Several men in suits exited the luxurious car. Just by looking, it was evident their suits were high-end. I watched them, thinking maybe they were some VIPs staying here. However, the group in suits headed straight for the front desk. Among the three of us employees, they stopped right in front of me and said, "Boss, we're here to pick you up." Huh? At first, I was completely taken aback, unable to grasp the situation. But there was no one behind me. This meant that those words were likely directed at me. Then, from behind, Samantha approached and exclaimed, "Huh, this guy's the boss. You must be mistaken. He only graduated high school and comes from poor background. He might have lucked out working in such a fancy hotel, but that's the best he's ever gonna get in life." The men looked puzzled by the drunken outburst from Samantha. "Boss, do you know her?" one of the men asked me, and I said, "Well, we went to high school together."
What do you mean, well? Don't get cheeky with me, especially after all that you've been bullied.
Just as Samantha was about to lunge at me, Mr. Johnson, the CEO, appeared from behind her, grabbed her shoulder, and calmly said, "Please calm down." "Mr. Johnson, who are these people?"
Actually, I've kept a secret from you until your birthday today. I've been thinking of interesting you with the new wing that's opening next month.
I remember the time, shortly after I joined the company, when Mr. Johnson had casually mentioned considering opening a new hotel. When the new hotel was confirmed, I realized just how incredible Mr. Johnson truly was. I had never dreamed that he would trust me with it.
I've been impressed with your work ethic ever since you joined the company. In my generation, it was common for folks to start working right after high school. But for your generation, it takes a lot of guts to make that choice. Still, you made up your mind and continued working here with dedication. I was hard on you because I wanted you to aim higher. I believed that if you could handle that pressure, you were someone I could rely on. So I've been planning this for a long time.
Then, Mr. Johnson took my hand and said with a kind expression, "I'm counting on you, and happy birthday." I couldn't hold back my tears. I felt like I'd finally been recognized by Mr. Johnson, who had always been so strict. For the first time, I felt that all my hard work had been worth it. He gently patted my shoulder, and the boss turned around, addressing Samantha. "It might not mean much telling you this, but your father's company, Anderson Group, might be in some hot water soon," he said with a knowing tone.
Excuse me. What are you talking about, old man? My dad wouldn't screw up. Gross. Let's go.
With that dismissive remark, Samantha left with her boyfriend. A few days later, the boss invited me out for dinner. It was then Mr. Johnson told me that his company have business dealings with the Anderson Group. Apparently, it was well known around town that Anderson Group was evading taxes, and upon Mr. Johnson noticed this, he ceased all transactions immediately. A few days after that, the news reported tax evasion by Anderson Group. Consequently, Samantha's father was arrested. The company went bankrupt, and word has it, Samantha was burdened with a significant debt. From what I've heard, Samantha is now wearing tattered clothes and is hustling to get by. If I see her again, maybe I'll treat her to a meal, calling it a continuation of our would-be date from the past. I looked at myself in the mirror, adjusting my tie, mentally preparing myself. From today, I'm the boss, I said, slapping my cheeks to psych myself up. Times are changing, and while a degree might not be as necessary as it once was, society still places a lot of emphasis on education. Certainly, compared to the past, it's said that at the very least, you need a college degree to make ends meet. But is that really the right way to look at things? People like Josh, who are bright and ambitious but, due to family circumstances, had to give up on further studies and enter the workforce at the young age of 18, have always existed. If Josh had been born into a wealthy family like Samantha, he might have ended up at an Ivy League college. My point is, you can't just judge someone's abilities based solely on their education. Thinking someone's incapable because they didn't graduate high school needs to be reevaluated. Could you imagine entering the workforce at 18? Regardless of the reason, if you're not continuing your education, then your only choice is to work. Shouldn't society pay more attention to young folks who are ready to sacrifice their teenage years, the golden age of youth, for a chance at a better life?
Immediately after I was born, my mother passed away, and I was raised by my grandmother. My father, who deeply loved my mother, was unable to love me, who he believed had taken her life. I was a shy child with few friends, and I was often bullied at school. At family gatherings, I was often uncomfortably compared to my mother in her childhood. Listening to stories of my spirited mother, who always made those around her laugh, I felt guilty over being different from her and increasingly found myself unable to speak. Yet, my grandmother always embraced me with kindness. She'd say,
"Amber, you have so many good qualities that are unique to you."
Her firm, cold hands, stroking my sobbing back, took away all my anxieties and sorrows. My grandmother always accepted me for who I was. The reason I applied to your company is because I resonate with your business philosophy. In a small, wooden apartment, I practice for interviews alone, speaking to my smartphone camera. With my university graduation looming, I'm the only one among my seminar peers and friends who hasn't received any job offers. I'm a post speaker with extreme stage fright, and I particularly struggle with situations like interviews. Even though I excel in exams and assignments, and sometimes help my peers with their studies, the fact that I haven't received any job offers has left my professors scratching their heads. Living alone on a scholarship and supporting myself with part-time jobs, I can't afford to take a gap year for job hunting. I had to secure a job by any means necessary. Knowing my circumstances, my peers, professors, and the career support staff gave me various advice and even helped me with interview practice. I stop the video and look at the notepad I've prepared for the interview. In that notepad are the information of the companies I'll be interviewing with, my self-analysis, and the encouraging words from my professors and friends. Tomorrow, I have an interview with the only company where I've made it to the final round. For me, who has been consistently dropped at the first interview, this is an unparalleled opportunity. I start recording myself with my smartphone again. My strengths are... My words stall there.
Amber, your strength is that you listen to others sincerely.
My grandmother's voice echoes in my mind. No matter how many times I practice, I stumble and my voice shakes when I try to speak about my strengths. Sorry, Grandma. I mumble, stopping the recording. From the photograph displayed on the bookshelf, my grandmother looks down at me. My grandmother always told me that my strength was being able to care for people. And yet, I wasn't able to take good care of her. Right after I started university, my grandmother's condition started to deteriorate. She caused minor fires by forgetting about the stove at night and repeated the same stories over and over. She would call me by my mother's name and scold me harshly. She also caused a huge uproar involving all our relatives when she went shopping and didn't return for hours. When it was decided, with my aunt's encouragement, to place her in a nursing home, I felt a sense of relief deep inside. I was tired. For me, who had just started the campus life I had longed for after struggling to get into university, my grandmother, who had become a stranger with her harshness and bizarre behavior, was an annoying hindrance and a source of fear. With not so good relations with my relatives, I had no one to rely on and had to bear it all alone. That's why when my grandmother caused trouble, and it was revealed to my relatives that she had dementia and would be placed in a facility, I was relieved from the bottom of my heart. On the day my grandmother was admitted to the facility, my aunt, my grandmother, and I headed there together. My grandmother didn't start raging as I had feared, but instead hugged me gently with tears in her eyes and said,
"Thank you, Amber. Take care."
At that moment, I was hit with the realization that I was leaving the only person who had always been on my side in such a place. A few days after my grandmother entered the facility, she passed away. That sad smile on that day was the last I saw of my grandmother. On the day of the interview, I left home with plenty of time to spare. Because I left home quite early, I arrived at the venue more than an hour early. I should find a place to rest and calm my nerves. I began walking towards the diner where I had my first job interview. Suddenly, a scene caught my eye. This was in a downtown area on a weekday, with salespeople and others bustling about their outdoor work. Among the busy crowd, an old lady was hesitantly pacing back and forth in front of the crosswalk. I had an uneasy feeling and paused on my way to the diner to watch the old woman. Her anxious face reminded me of my grandmother on that day, and I couldn't take my eyes off her. A businessman engrossed in his phone walked right into her. The old lady fell in the middle of the crosswalk. Watch out! Before I knew it, I was running. I hurried over to help the old lady up. "Are you okay?" Supporting the old lady, I somehow managed to move her to the side of the road.
"I'm sorry, I got lost trying to go home,"
she said apologetically. "Really? Where do you live?" I asked as I pulled out my phone. I still had time and thought I might be able to help guide her. As I was about to input the address the old lady gave me into my phone, I stopped in surprise. "Arizona, you say?" "Yes, it is," the old lady replied with a smile.
"It seems I've gotten a bit confused after not seeing it for a while. I'm glad I met a kind soul."
Seeing the old lady smiling happily, I was taken aback. This was New York. As I was wondering what to do, I noticed a small piece of fabric sewn onto the old lady's clothes.
"Sorry for causing you trouble."
As I handed the old lady a warm cup of tea, she smiled apologetically. We were now sitting across from each other in the diner. We decided to wait for the old lady's pickup at the diner. I called the number sewn onto her clothes from my phone. The person who answered was a woman named Catherine. She apologized repeatedly in a weary voice, saying, "I'm so sorry for the trouble." I told Catherine where we were and that we had found a place to settle down, and that I would contact her again. Then, I hung up and arrived at the diner. It's close to many businesses, and I had plenty of time since I arrived early. I spread out my notepad that I prepared for the interview in front of the old lady. When I looked at the old lady, our eyes met. She asked with a worried look,
"Who are we waiting for now?"
I hesitated for a moment and then answered honestly, "Catherine." The old lady's eyes widened in surprise. "Catherine, is she coming here alone? I hope she doesn't get lost," she said worriedly. Then, she began to talk about Catherine. In her mind, Catherine was still a young girl who often got lost.
"Catherine is truly a kind-hearted girl, always being made to cry by her younger brother, James."
She talked about Catherine and her brother, James, sharing many stories. As I listened to the old lady's stories with a smile, I glanced at the clock in the diner. My interview was approaching. If I wait here, Catherine will come to pick her up. I should probably let the diner staff know the situation and start heading out. Just as I thought to get up, the old lady noticed and smiled at me.
"You're leaving, aren't you? Thank you, and take care."
Her lonely smile reminded me of my grandmother.
Amber, thank you, and take care.
My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind, and I found myself once more settling into the hard bench I was about to leave. It's still okay. There's still more than 30 minutes left. As I assured her with a smile, saying, I'm fine, the old lady beamed with relief.
Hey, what are your parents like?
The cheerful old lady, who had been chatting incessantly, turned to me with this sudden question. My parents. As I hesitated, the old lady smiled kindly.
Yes, the parents of a kind young lady like you. They must be wonderful people, right?
I could feel my smile become strained at the old lady's words. She chuckled, saying hey, and looked at me with gentle eyes. Before I knew it, I was sharing a story I had never told anyone before with this complete stranger. My mom passed away shortly after I was born. My dad said he couldn't forgive me, who took my mother's life and left me to my maternal grandmother. I only know the two of them through pictures. I don't know much about my father, but I was often told by relatives that my mother was a bright and lovely woman. I resemble my mother in appearance, so everyone compared me to her. My grandmother took the place of my parents. She was really kind and accepted me for who I was, and raised me with love. But Granny, she gradually forgot about me. She began to think of me as her own daughter. Even though Granny was the only one who always saw me for who I was, Granny never compared me to my mom. Yet, she began to mistake me for my mother, called me by my mother's name, and I disappeared from her mind. Once I started talking, I couldn't stop, and I started to cry. A cold hand gently stroked my sobbing head.
There, you've had a hard time, haven't you?
I felt warmth spread from the spot where her hand had touched me, a comforting warmth slowly extending to the depths of my heart. Granny held me in the end. She called me by my name, and yet I abandoned Granny. I couldn't continue after that. As I continued to sob, Granny gently stroked my head.
It's okay, you're a lovely grandchild. The most important thing is for you to be happy. I'm sure your grandmother, and your mother too, would wish for nothing more than your happiness.
The old lady said gently as she stroked my hair.
Having a kind girl like you as a daughter or grandchild, they must have been so happy.
Facing the old lady, I kept crying. We must have stood out quite a bit because the expression on the face of Catherine, who came to pick us up, was quite shocked.
I'm sorry if my mother has caused any trouble for you.
I shook my head at Catherine, who kept bowing an apology. The old lady said, I knew Catherine couldn't do it. I'm sorry for causing trouble to the adult here, with a sigh. Catherine's face twisted in sadness. You know, Catherine, your grandmother just can't connect the Catherine in front of her with the Catherine in her memory. But I believe she truly loves you very much. Before I knew it, I was rambling. I knew it was none of my business, but I had to say it. I continued to relay to Catherine the stories I heard from the old lady about how much she loved Catherine. Catherine seemed shocked at first, but gradually her eyes welled up, and she started to cry with muffled sobs. I said goodbye to Catherine and the old lady, who kept thanking me, and I left diner. I was way past the time of my job interview. I took out my cell phone and called the company to apologize for not being able to make it to the interview. Then I headed straight for the train station to go home. When I got home, I started talking to my grandmother in the picture about the day I had and about my life up until now. I talked for hours on end, crying. I had never talked this much in my life, and the words just kept flowing out of me. There was so much I wanted to talk about. The next day, seeing my tear-stained face, my professor and friends looked very disappointed. When they heard my story, they were astounded, saying, "What a waste, and you should have just left it to the staff." But one of them said, "But it's so like you, Amber," and everyone began to agree, saying, "Indeed, and Amber is such a good listener, it makes you want to talk." With their words of encouragement, let's try again, I headed for the job placement office. The staff member, who had become very familiar to me, looked at me with a concerned expression. I don't think what I've done is a mistake. I have no regrets either. However, the fact that I had to redo my job hunting was depressing. I started my job search again. Good companies had already ended their recruitment, and I kept applying to promising companies among those left, but the results weren't very good as usual. Then one day, I received a call on my cell phone.
Sorry for the sudden call. Is this Amber Brown?
It was a call from a company where I couldn't have an interview the other day, and it was about conducting a re-interview. Feeling as if I was bewitched by a fox, I told my professor about this. My professor and my friends were happy for me as if it were their own, saying, "That's good." The opportunity has come around again. As soon as I got home, I reported this joy to my grandmother. I pulled myself together and started preparing for the interview again. On the day of the interview, when I told my name at the reception, the receptionist called the person in charge on the internal phone. As I was waiting for the person in charge in front of the reception, a woman came in after a while. Ha! Seeing the person who appeared, I was so surprised that my mouth was open. It was Catherine, who was dressed in a suit.
It's been a long time.
When Catherine bowed politely and started walking, saying, "Please come this way," I followed her, not knowing what was going on. As Catherine continued to move deeper into the company, she stopped in front of a heavy door. The plate says the president's office. When Catherine knocked on the door, there was an instruction to come in from inside, and I reluctantly stepped into the president's office.
Nice to meet you, Amber Brown. I'm Johnson, the president.
The person in the back of the splendid room was a man in his late 50s. He introduced himself briefly and laughed, saying, "My mother bothered you the other day."
My sister really wanted to meet you. You were going to have a home interview the day you helped my mother, weren't you? This is a family shame, so I decided to set up a re-interview.
Are you by any chance James? I, who had been listening to his words in astonishment, blurted out something off the mark out of nervousness. The president twisted his face and said, "That's right," with a puzzled face. "I'm sorry. I heard a lot of stories from your grandmother. She said you are rambunctious but really kind, smart, friend-loving, and proud son." I continued in a rush. There was something I had to convey no matter what. "I thought your grandmother was a very nice person when I talked to her. She's kind and caring, and she loves her family more than anyone else. She's a warm mother. It's not a shame. She's a really nice person." After saying so, I noticed the surprised face of the president and hurriedly bowed my head. The president was silent for a while as if thinking, but coughed once and said heavily, "Let's start the re-interview." A heavy atmosphere flowed in the room. I was nervous and felt cold sweat dripping all over my body. I didn't realize it until now, but the person in front of me is the president of a large company. He's not someone I should talk to casually. Suddenly brought back to reality, I answered the president's questions in a flustered manner. I was sweating on the palm of my hand. When the interview progressed to some extent, the president said, "That's enough. It's over." It was a great opportunity, but it wasn't good at all. When I was depressed, the president sighed heavily.
You're a very disadvantageous person. You waste opportunities for strangers, and when it comes to your own affairs, you suddenly become flustered. You're just at a loss.
Then, he put a notebook on the desk.
That's why you're loved by so many people.
That was the notepad I used during my job search. I don't know how I managed to lose it, but I wonder how it ended up here. As I was staring at the notepad, the president gave a wry smile.
This is what my sister received from a waitress who ran after you when you left the diner. I didn't really understand what you were trying to say earlier since you seemed so flustered. But by reading this, I can understand who you are.
The president signaled with his eyes, and Catherine opened the last page of the notepad and handed it to me.
Interviews are conducted to understand a person's character. I wasn't sure about your character based solely on this interview, but I have a good understanding of who you are. You're a sincere person who listens carefully to others and genuinely engages with their feelings. I would like such a person to work in our company.
While listening to the president's words, I couldn't take my eyes off the last page of the notepad. There, in a beautifully elegant handwriting that I didn't recognize, was written, "Thank you for listening to my story. I wish you happiness." Holding back tears that were about to overflow, I bowed and said, "I'm honored to serve." After that, I got a job in a company and worked in sales. My friends were surprised to hear that I, who am not good at talking, am in sales. But surprisingly, I found myself well suited for this job. I listen carefully to the customer's words and suggest the best plans. Although I'm still not good at speaking up, I'm living a fulfilling life with the help of those around me. I still occasionally visit that old lady's house and listen to her stories. The old lady sometimes mistakes me for Catherine, but her warm heart has saved me many times. Thank you, Grandma. Facing the old lady in front of me and my grandmother in heaven, I uttered words of gratitude.
I'm an office worker, Henry Johnson. I got a job right after high school, so now, at 23, I'm in my 5th year. From the start, my superiors were all kind to me, the youngest one with no part-time job experience. I've worked hard, even if ineffectively at times, and have become quite accustomed to this job. And so, in the spring of my 5th year, I was assigned to be the chief of a project for the first time. This was the start of a tumultuous period.
I'm Lisa Smith. Pleased to meet y'all.
A newly hired employee in her first year out of college greeted me like this on the first day of the fiscal year. With her dazzling looks and a brimming, confident smile, she didn't seem nervous from day one. No surprise there. She is the only daughter of one of the company's presidents. Being the boss's daughter, she displays an imposing attitude unfitting of a new hire. Some male employees seem pretty pleased due to her appearance, but everybody is visibly taken aback by her familiarity, except for me. Yes, I would be surprised by a new employee, the president's daughter or not, showing such imposing behavior on our first meeting, but I wasn't because I already knew her very well.
Oh, Henry's still here, surprisingly persistent, and you.
I had often heard that sarcastic tone until 5 years ago. Unpleasant memories flashed back. Yay, Lisa, still hanging in there.
You've dyed your hair, trying to act all cool now, having a life debut as an adult. Too late. Hilarious.
Yes, she was my high school classmate. Dyeing hair was against the rules in high school. I'm not trying to have any debut. When I responded modestly, she said, "Wow, talking back now. How cheeky. We're the same age, cheeky." In fact, I'm technically her senior in this workplace. But for Lisa, that didn't matter. Whether she's a new employee or whatever, she thinks it's allowed because she's the president's daughter. Even if not for that, it was futile to argue with her as she's been hearty since old times. Whatever I would respond with, I would only get a condescending response in return. This was something I experienced many times during high school. I first met Lisa in the spring of my sophomore year in high school. Since the start of the term, she stood out and seemed to be at the top of the girls' group. On the other hand, as for me, I do have friends, but not many, and I'm not particularly conspicuous or noteworthy. In the school hierarchy, I'm about average or maybe a bit below. I had no intention to engage with Lisa or her group. Yet, she started making sarcastic remarks from our first meeting.
Hey, is that fun?
I was into card games at the time and played them with my friends during breaks. Lisa, who spied on us, purposely said that, "Well, it's fun." When I replied, she laughed loudly and said, "Real geeky stuff, just like a kid, doing the same thing as elementary students."
Geeks are really like kids, aren't they? Doing stuff that elementary kids do.
Did she approach me just to say such a thing even though we had never spoken before? I couldn't understand the meaning behind that action at all, and I felt a sort of disdain. From my perspective, people who break school rules with makeup and accessories and get scolded by the teacher every day for the same thing seem way more childish, you know. Back then, I wasn't thinking about the consequences, so I inadvertently spoke my mind. Then, Lisa got furious. She must have been really offended, as she started picking on me almost every day thereafter. I've gotten myself into trouble. I shouldn't have said that. Even though I regretted it internally, it was too late. Hoping she'd get tired of me quickly, I stopped responding at some point and just listened, which probably made her think she won. Eventually, we ended up in the same class for 3 years, and I had to endure her sarcasm every day. Even though it wasn't serious bullying, being constantly subjected to unpleasant remarks was quite mentally draining. The worst part was when she learned about my job placement after graduation.
Hey, I heard you've got a job lined up.
I really should have only told my close friends, but somehow Lisa knew. Puzzled, I responded, well,
So pathetic, can't even go to college. Are you Pua, by any chance? If you're born into the wrong family, life really is tough. Huh, I'm really glad I'm me.
Eck. Why do I have to listen to Lisa bragging on top of my job news? It's completely irrelevant. While I hoped she would leave soon, Lisa dropped a bombshell.
I heard from the teacher, your workplace is going to be my dad's company.
What? This was indeed shocking. I knew her father was the CEO, and since I researched for the interview, I knew the CEO's last name was the same as her. But it's a common name, and I never thought they would be related. To think that I finally secured a job, but it had to be at the company owned by a classmate I dislike. I couldn't hide my astonishment.
Hilarious, you seem displeased. Don't worry, I also plan to join my dad's company after graduating from college. But you probably won't last even 5 years, so we won't be working together.
She laughed aloud. She kept looking down on me until graduation, using it as material for her jokes.
I'm joining my dad's company. I can get in without lifting a finger, unlike you, studying so hard for the exams. So pitiful. His company is so stylish. This guy will definitely stick out like a sore thumb.
Until the day of the graduation ceremony, I had to endure her sarcasm. When I finally got the job, I thought I was finally free from Lisa. Those 5 years passed quickly. I knew she would join someday. Even knowing we would meet again, I stayed with this company because I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to see her face ever again, and I could have searched for another job. But if I wasn't there when she came 5 years later, she would surely say, I knew he wouldn't be here, and laugh. The mere thought was unbearable. So, I will grow and surprise her when she joins. I will definitely show her. With this thought, I worked hard for 5 years, but reality didn't go as planned. She joined my project where I served as the chief immediately after she joined the company. I honestly didn't want to deal with her, but being close would give more opportunities to prove myself, so I was more motivated than ever. But she was as arrogant as before, even more so than in high school.
Having Henry as a leader is nothing but worrisome. Shouldn't I do it instead?
I heard someone making snide comments during the meeting. Is this discussion even meaningful? Why not just do it this way? And making obviously off-the-mark suggestions as if they were right, and to top it off, leaving early without any apology for being late. Lisa's selfishness quickly became the talk of the entire company, but she seemed not to care at all. Every time she would say, "Daddy would forgive me," or "I'm the boss's daughter, so I'm special, right?" Invoking the name of the boss, creating a situation where no one could reprimand her. That's why I realized she doesn't care about my work performance, not even a bit, and getting back at her is probably impossible for a lifetime. So, at the very least, I want to successfully complete this project, where I serve as a leader for the first time. That's how my wishes gradually changed. But, good job, everyone. The moment it was time to leave that day, Lisa rose from her seat to leave. It's the standard leaving time, and our company isn't a sweatshop, so there's no constant need for overtime. But hey, Lisa, what about the document due today? I had to ask because I was genuinely worried. There were documents to that day, decided weeks in advance, and there was no submission from Lisa.
Oh, I forgot. Henry, you do it.
Hearing that response, I couldn't stay silent. No, it's impossible. I have a lot of things to do, and everyone else is working. You can't just delegate, you need to finish your own task responsibly. I would prefer to ignore this in private life, but it's work, so I can't do that. It would be problematic if this inconvenience reaches other people and clients. Then, perhaps not liking being scolded for a change, Lisa raised her voice a bit and said,
"It's over the top not to be able to leave on time. I was busy. It's not my fault you assigned more work than could be finished by the deadline."
"Indeed, I think I am responsible for the workload allocation, but honestly, I knew from the beginning that she does not work earnestly. That's why I only assigned her basic document creation, and she spends most of her work hours looking at cosmetics on the computer or playing with her smartphone. It's not like I can just say, 'Oh, is that so?' when she says she was busy and then tries to leave on time. What were you busy with? What work did you do today? Can you say that in front of the other employees who worked hard all day?" Even the articulate Lisa could find no words to retort and just glared at me in silence. Eventually, she said, "Impossible things are impossible. I have a party to attend. Overtime is out of the question. If you say annoying things anymore, I'll tell my daddy. You'll be fired immediately," and left towards the exit. Many colleagues feared these words, and the majority of employees could not reprimand her, who is a newcomer, but that's wrong when everyone is working so hard. It's ridiculous that I, who am working seriously at the company, would get fired, and she, who is playing around, would act superior. If that really happens, it would be too absurd. I realized that saying anything more would be useless and was thinking about what to do next. I was thinking that even my own work would take long, but maybe if I stay up all night, I can finish everything. I thought I had done my best every day, but I had taken on too much work considering not making others work overtime. That's why I can't handle such troubles well. Thinking about it, maybe Lisa is right. Maybe it's my allocation mistake. Maybe I can't complain even if I get fired. Just when I was feeling down.
Ouch!
I heard Lisa's voice from the door and looked that way. There was a stranger, a middle-aged man I've never seen before, dressed in a neat and clean suit. Wondering who he was, I heard Lisa's voice saying, "Daddy, why?" and finally understood. That person was the boss I was meeting for the first time. If the boss, who dotes on his daughter, had seen the current situation, this could be a quick resolution. Am I getting fired immediately? I was frozen, fearing what the boss might say. But soon, I noticed something strange about Lisa.
Well,
I thought she would set him on me, saying I was bullying her and get me fired, but she seemed flustered. Then, no need to say anything. The boss simply uttered those words. Then, unusually, Lisa fell silent, not arguing back. Seeing such a compliant Lisa was, of course, a first.
"You are fired today."
With the boss's next words, the room fell into a silent hush. So, it's come to this. Even the boss is just human. Seeing his daughter distressed close at hand, of course, doesn't feel good. But was I wrong? What was the right course of action as the leader? It's too late to regret now, but it's undeniably frustrating. "Yes, I am very sorry," I muttered my response. I had a lot I wanted to object to. But talking back to the boss wouldn't change the outcome, I believe. He is, after all, Lisa's father. The moment I completely gave up.
"No, you have nothing to apologize for."
The boss said so. I, surprised, looked up. Huh? And there, the bewildered expression of the boss and the pale-faced Lisa were seen.
"The one who's getting fired is you, Lisa. Did I ever say you can do whatever you like just because I'm the boss's daughter? You seem to misunderstand something. I let you in this company because I thought it would be troublesome for others to hire someone as ignorant and as selfish as you are. So it wasn't about letting you do what you want here. It was about hoping you'd learn some life lessons. Seems like it didn't get through."
Observing this scene, the boss seemed to have a completely different character than I had imagined. I thought he was doting and spoiling Lisa. Rather, he had a strict aura, and Lisa seemed nervous.
I'm sorry, Dad. I'll be serious from now on."
As the boss, I can't employ someone who acts selfishly without considering the inconvenience to other employees.
Even as Lisa was nearly in tears apologizing, there was no sign of forgiveness. In the end, while ignoring Lisa, he apologized sincerely to us, the employees.
I'm truly sorry for the trouble my daughter has caused. Please let me do Lisa's remaining work from now on.
We were surprised at the boss's offer and did hesitate at first, but he insisted, so we eventually let him. Lisa kept sobbing and begging her father to reconsider, but the boss never conceded. It was a pitiful sight, unimaginable from her usually haughty demeanor, but given her past behaviors, no one stood up for her. Thanks to the boss, the documentation was completed on time, and the project was a success. It's rare for the boss, who's mostly at our overseas offices, to be at the headquarters, and my superiors were wide-eyed seeing the boss doing the kind of documentation work a newbie does. I was tense all the way, and my palms were sweaty, but working with him, I realized that although the boss is strict, he is a wonderful person who cares about his employees. I can't understand why his daughter turned out like that. Eventually, Lisa was fired. I heard it through the grapevine, so I'm not sure if it's true, but apparently, boss told her if this company won't do, then the next step is monetary training. Does that mean she might be meditating now? I don't know what she is actually doing now, but if she learns from this and even a bit of her attitude changes to be more like the average person, that would be something, I think.
Hey, this is sudden, but I can't do this anymore. I'm just too tired. We should break up.
What? My name is Jake Johnson. Right now, I'm in the middle of a breakup talk. Actually, I was planning to propose today. Until a while ago, we were having a fun date, but now she started to talk about breaking up.
I've thought about it a lot, but I think it's best if we part ways, Jake. You're a nice guy, but you're not for me. I'm just bored.
What? Why?
Because our dates recently are only at cheap, nearby places. Did you think I was enjoying them?
That's because I was trying not to spend too much money.
That stingy attitude turned me off.
It's not like that. I was thinking about our future, so I thought we should save money.
Like, future? What future? Don't blame this on me. And I can say it now, but Jake, your fashion sense is too plain. Show some effort for me.
I'm not into flashy clothes. They are expensive too.
I wanted you to dress up too. Even if I dress up, it's going to be pointless if you didn't. I think our values are different. Don't you think so?
I knew she always admired a lavish lifestyle. When we started dating, I bought her a branded bag and she was very excited. She was cute. However, last year, her parents got promoted to executive positions in large corporations. Since then, she started to use branded items that I didn't know. Lately, she seems to prefer high-end, flashy brands. The tasteful accessories she matched with her clothes are all branded too. Indeed, compared to that, I would have a simple existence. I always wanted to make you happy. This is cruel.
I've made up my mind. Let's break up today. Actually, someone has asked me out. If I'm going to marry, that person has to be wealthy. This guy is rich, has a good taste, and we share values. Do you understand? He's rich. Sorry, but I decided to switch to him.
You like rich guys that much?
Let's just say that. I chose someone who matches me.
I see. Okay then.
But well, as we were lovers for 2 years, let me say thank you for that. And goodbye. I don't want to see you again. Bye.
With that, she left her seat, The sound of her heels fading remained in my ears. A half-finished Moscow Mule is left on the table. The lipstick mark on the straw is stabbing my sight. I just kept staring at the lights of the Empire State Building from the window. The reality that I was dumped by my girlfriend remained there. She was my colleague in the same company. We got close when I was in charge of her OJT and started dating after I confessed my feelings. After dating for 2 years, as I started to think about marrying her seriously, I led a frugal life and saved money for the future. I could endure a frugal life for her sake. Finally reaching the target amount of money, I decided to propose to her. To propose to her, I reserved a coffee bar with a view of the Empire State Building. Today was supposed to be the best day, but it has turned into the worst one. The next day was Sunday, but one day off wasn't enough to recover. I managed to go to work as there were pending tasks, but I couldn't concentrate and made many mistakes. My manager was concerned and I took afternoon off. I'm so disappointed in myself. I spent days in despair. One day, I received a notification for a reunion from my middle school in my hometown. I thought it might be a change of pace and decided to attend. I haven't been to my parents' house for a while too. My parents' house is about a 3-hour train ride away. It's a typical farmhouse around there. It is now run by my brother and his wife. I also come sometimes to help with the farming. Being back in my hometown after so long was quite healing. Local cuisine made by my mom was more delicious than I expected. After the meal, Dad called me over as I was resting. We sat together on the porch, wondering what he wanted to talk about, him being usually so quiet. Instead of talking, he just sat smoking his cigarette in silence. Mom brought some coffee for us. By the time he finished his third cigarette, he began to speak softly.
A middle school reunion, huh? How many years has it been?
The last time we had one was before many of us were moving out of this town to attend university.
I see.
Dad lit his fourth cigarette.
You don't look happy for that. Are you not having a good time?
Well, I was looking forward to it.
You haven't been laughing at all. Your feelings are always written all over your face. I can tell even without you saying anything.
You got me.
Is there really nothing wrong? Is it something you can't talk about?
Well, it's a pathetic story, but my girlfriend dumped me. I was thinking of marrying her. I've been depressed. I couldn't sleep and lost my appetite.
I see. That really is pathetic. Do you think you could get over it?
She dumped me the day I was going to propose. It was the worst. I feel like I've been thrown into the depths of despair.
That's horrible. Anyway, cheer up.
Hey, it's not funny. This doesn't comfort me at all when I'm seriously feeling down.
Life is long. Many things happen. This is life, full of ups and downs.
It's also said fall 7 times, stand up 8, right?
That's another way to put it. Basically, if bad things happen, good things will happen too.
Will there be any good things from now on?
You have to make a move first. If you're at rock bottom now, you can't go any lower. Just start crawling up and start walking.
Well, I do think this is the rock bottom. I'm thinking of quitting my current job and looking for a new one.
All right. Do as you please. Well, if you try your best and it doesn't work out, you can always come back. That's what hometowns are for.
Saying that, my dad stood up and said, "I'm going to take a shower." It seems Dad was trying to cheer me up in his own way. Once I returned to New York, I thought about quitting my current job and starting something new. The next day was the middle school reunion. Familiar faces gathers in relatively large pub in this area, and the reunion was lively. Even though I was still feeling down due to the breakup with my girlfriend, everyone talked to me without hesitation.
"What's wrong, Jake? You look so gloomy. It's been a while since we met. Cheer up."
Sorry. I had some issues in New York.
"What happened? By that face, you get dumped, huh?"
That's, unfortunately, spot on.
"I see. Well, we won't ask for details, but moping around won't solve anything, right? Time doesn't stop. Just move forward, even if it's just going with the flow. Look at me. I move so fast that my hair can't catch up."
That's just premature balding. Everyone burst into laughter. I also laughed heartily for the first time in a while.
"Well, it must be hard and painful, but life still goes on. If it's painful, laugh it off and become a man that can prove her wrong."
That's true. If it comes to that, I'll become a man who can even make a harem.
That's the spirit. And I have a request. If you manage to make a harem, can you share one with me?
Behind you. When I pointed, my friend looked back.
Behind, geek.
Oh wow, so that's what you've been thinking. Pretty bold of you to say that in front of such a cute wife.
Oh no, I forgot my wife is here today.
This guy's wife was also our classmate in middle school. Despite marrying after a passionate romance, what a fool. Before I knew it, the reunion turned into a comforting party for me. I was warmly encouraged and patted on the back by everyone. They were all such great people. Laughing, a few tears came out too. Yeah, let's just forget it. Encouraged by my dad's clumsy support and my friends' cheer, I decided to move forward. I managed to switch gears and return to New York. Several years have passed since then. Having broken up with her, I switched jobs and am working in a different type of industry. Through work connections, I got introduced to a sushi restaurant. It's a traditional sushi restaurant near the fish market. I recently favored this place due to the rugged-faced chef's friendly nature and his meticulous work beyond expectation. I had a sudden craving for good sushi and walked into this restaurant. Opening the sliding door with a clatter, "Welcome," I heard the lively voice of the chef. When our eyes met, he smiles only with his mouth. For the normally smiling chef, it's the warmest greeting. I found an empty seat and sat at the counter.
"Jake, it's been a while."
"I've been busy, sorry."
"If you're busy, that's good, right? So, what'll it be today?"
"The usual, and a medium beer."
"All right, a medium beer for Jake."
I wiped my hands with a hot towel and was watching the chef skillfully make sushi when I heard the sliding door. It seemed a customer had come in. It appears to be as popular as ever. "So, chef?" I was about to ask how's business, when a female voice behind me said, "Excuse me." Reflexively, I turned around, and there was a familiar face. It was my ex-girlfriend.
Is it really you, Jake? Why are you here?
It was a sudden reunion. We ended up staring at each other, both surprised. I was shocked by the unexpected reunion, but more so by the change in her appearance. She was far more flashy than before. To be honest, it felt kind of tacky, and the perfume was overpowering. Trying to hide my shock, I replied, "Well, I'm here to eat sushi, obviously." I took a sip from my beer, trying to avoid her gaze. She, having confirmed it was me, laughed haughtily and began talking about things I didn't ask and didn't want to hear.
It seems like your taste has improved a bit since then. Not that it matters, lol.
I was ignoring her.
I have a boyfriend now. He's a company president. This is a place where wealthy people like me and my boyfriend come. It feels so odd seeing a poor person like you here. Besides, this place is expensive, you know? Can you afford it?
The chef was silently making sushi with a stern face. She didn't seem to be a welcomed customer. I can't believe I was going to propose to a woman like this. A bit of self-mockery crossed my mind. Oh, really now? But I'm earning enough to afford the sushi here. Mind your own business. Replying is such a bother. The beer tastes bitter. I had a ton of ribbitals, but I felt sorry for causing trouble to the chef and the restaurant, so I just stayed silent, drinking my beer while watching the chef's skillful hands over the counter. I decided to let go of the unnecessary talks about my ex-girlfriend. It would only ruin the delicious sushi. Then, the sliding door opened with a clatter, and a thin man with gold-framed glasses entered. He was wearing a quite luxurious suit.
You're so late.
My ex-girlfriend spoke in a cutesy voice as she turned to the entrance. Is this her boyfriend?
Can't help it. It was an important business call. Did you order?
The man adjusted his glasses and responded,
Not yet. Chef, we'll have 2 servings of sashimi, chef's choice, and 2 beers, please.
All right, 2 draft beers for the newcomers.
This guy seems to be my ex-girlfriend's boyfriend, the rich company president from earlier talk. My ex-girlfriend, sitting at the same counter, turned towards me and spoke smugly.
Oh, this is my boyfriend, Robert. He's the president of a company called XX Inc. He was even featured in a business magazine recently.
Following my ex-girlfriend's introduction, the man adjusted his glasses and said hello with a snort. What an unpleasant guy. His words irritated me, but I decided to greet him as well. Turning to the boyfriend, I said, I'm Jake. Nice to meet you. Looking at the boyfriend's face closely, it seemed somewhat familiar. My ex-girlfriend was introducing me to her boyfriend with a smirk.
This is Jake, my ex-boyfriend. He was my colleague, and we dated after he asked me out. But he was too plain and poor for me, so I broke up with him.
Oh, really? So you are the ex-boyfriend. Not a match for her. Huh, too bad.
After they said that, they both laughed and moved to a table seat at the back. What a damn unpleasant bunch. As I was drinking my beer to wash away those words, the chef served a roll of medium fatty tuna a few minutes later.
Here you go, medium fatty tuna roll.
Chef, I didn't order this.
It's from the customer earlier, as a gesture of goodwill. Will you accept it?
Sure, I'll have it. It's apparently a bothering, but I guess I shouldn't refuse it. Annoyed, I gobbled it up quickly. As I decided to say thanks, I went to their table and said, "I received the tuna roll. Thank you very much."
No problem. It was a thank you from her. It was good, wasn't it? And, pardon me, but you probably don't get many chances to visit such places, so please enjoy.
What an insufferable guy, I thought. I had fulfilled the duty and was about to return to my seat when, for some reason, he was staring at my face closely. What a creepy guy. As I was thinking this, he murmured, "Jake." "Huh, what's with this guy? Now he's calling my name." As I was thinking this, his face turned pale quickly and his mouth was moving, forming no words. It was hilarious. Come to think of it, XX Inc. is one of our subcontractors. Actually, after being dumped, I started a new business with my marriage funds. I worked hard, thinking of it as a rebirth. It was tough, but I was able to ride the trend, and now my company has grown with annual sales of several billion and over 200 employees. So, this guy is the president of XX Inc. XX Inc. recently had a change of president when the foolish son took over after his predecessor's retirement. The feature in the business magazine was about the presidential change. It was small, though. To us, it's just one of many clients we have, but from their perspective, we account for more than half of their sales, so we should be a top client for them. Well, it's not a particularly necessary client, and there are many companies that could replace them. Ever since the president changed, the reputation hasn't been good, so maybe we should consider terminating our transactions with them. I don't like this guy.
Excuse me, aren't you the president of Company A, Jake?
The man asked hesitantly. Yes, that's correct. It is indeed my company. Aren't you the president of XX, Robert? I believe you were one of our clients. I've met you a few times. Sorry, I forgot.
Yes, we're always grateful for your help. Once again, I'm Robert from XX Inc. I didn't know you favored this restaurant, Jake. I sincerely apologize for my impertinence earlier.
No, I enjoyed the tuna roll. Thank you. Besides, it's my private time now. It seems you are on a date too, so don't worry about it. His attitude completely changed the moment he realized who I was. He sure acts like the foolish president he's rumored to be. Also, I'm sorry to bring this up now, but I would like to discuss business soon, so I will have my secretary contact you later. I have been thinking about revising the contract.
Yes, I will be waiting for your contact. I just remembered that I had an errand to run, so I will excuse myself now.
I see. It must be tough working until this late. Well then, I look forward to hearing from you. The man hurriedly began to prepare to leave. His glasses were about to fall off his nose. That's when my ex-girlfriend intervened.
Wait, are you saying Jake is a president now? No way. That's impossible.
Unfortunately, it's true. Just like I was talking to him now.
But to have Robert's company as a subcontractor, how much do you earn annually, Jake?
Still talking about money at this point. I was astounded, but I thought I might as well tell her. You can guess, but I live in a Manhattan penthouse now and drive a Mercedes and a Ferrari. This suit is custom made from the finest materials. I've also been investing in stocks, and that's been profitable lately. Doing better than before, ho.
No way. I didn't know. If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have broken up with you.
Well, it's too late. This woman can only see people through money. She's terrible. After that, I quit my company and used the money I had saved for the future to start a business.
I can't believe it. You were so plain and poor.
Yeah, true. Not walking into the future with you was truly the right decision. Thank you for breaking up with me at that time. Thanks to that, I changed and the current me exists. You also seem to have a wealthy boyfriend, so good for you. Well, be happy.
Look.
My ex-girlfriend's face turned red and she began to tremble. She looked like she was about to cry. She silently stood up and left without waiting for Robert. Robert, seeming apologetic, chased after my ex-girlfriend. His face was pale. That XX Inc., they won't last long. Finally, the restaurant became quiet. Chef, sorry for causing a commotion.
So, that was your ex-girlfriend, Jake. She visits sometimes, but to be honest, her perfume is too strong. I was hoping she would spare the restaurant.
She was a colleague from my previous company. It's an old story. I want to punch myself at that time.
I see. You must have been through great hardship, Jake.
Well, kind of, but thanks to that, I can now come to this restaurant, so it's all good. Rarely, the chef smiled. I also smiled in response. I told him I would come again and left the restaurant. Today's sushi was delicious.